In the waning glow of a March afternoon, Lady Eleanor Harcourt moved through the grand ballroom of Harcourt Hall with the composed grace expected of a baronet's daughter, though a quiet storm churned beneath her calm exterior. Servants hurried around her with flowers, polishing silver and adjusting decorations for the wedding that would, in her family's hopes, restore their fortunes. Eleanor drifted among them like a figure apart, her mind fixed on the role she was meant to fulfill. She paused before the tall windows, watching the pale sky stretch above the grounds where carriages were beginning to arrive for the evening's supper. Her mother often said that the future of their household rested upon Eleanor's shoulders, and Eleanor, accustomed to responsibility, had never protested. She did not expect romance. She merely hoped for goodwill. The Duke had shown neither warmth nor cruelty, only a distant civility that offered little comfort. The sudden arrival of her cousin Clara broke the quiet. Clara, all brightness and unchecked enthusiasm, burst into the ballroom with the confidence of a girl untouched by disappointment. Barely 19, she possessed a beauty so striking that matrons paused to stare. Her laughter filled the room as she admired the arrangements. "Eleanor, it will be glorious," she declared. "The entire ton will speak of this night." Eleanor smiled, though unease stirred within her. Clara had no malice, only an innocence that overlooked the shadows her charm cast. Still, Eleanor felt a twinge of something unspoken, an ache she pushed aside. She turned her attention back to the preparations, guiding the servants with quiet precision. When the ballroom finally emptied, leaving Eleanor alone in the glittering silence, she felt the weight of the coming day settle upon her. The wedding had been planned with meticulous care, yet she longed for a moment of certainty. With a sigh, she made her way toward the gallery to confirm the musician's placement. Before she opened the door, voices drifted through the narrow gap. She recognized the Duke's controlled tone, followed by Clara's soft laugh. Something in that laugh, an intimacy she could not ignore, rooted Eleanor to the spot. She stepped closer, her pulse quickening. Through the opening she saw them. The Duke stood near the gallery windows, his posture rigid as though resisting temptation. Clara faced him, her expression tender, her hand resting upon his coat as though it belonged there. Eleanor's breath faltered. She watched, frozen, as Clara lifted her face and the Duke, after a moment's hesitation, lowered his head to meet her in a kiss that stripped Eleanor of every fragile belief she had held. It was not a mistake. It was a choice. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the doorframe, her world narrowing to the quiet betrayal before her eyes. She felt no rage, only a hollow stillness. When Clara finally stepped back, cheeks flushed, and the Duke murmured something too soft to hear, Eleanor forced herself to retreat without a sound. She walked the corridor with slow, steady steps, her vision blurring. Each movement felt like a struggle between composure and collapse. She reached the small withdrawing room overlooking the gardens and closed the door behind her. Only then did her body tremble, her hand pressed to her lips to contain the cry rising within her. The truth settled over her with merciless clarity. She had been chosen for convenience, while Clara had been chosen for desire. A humiliation deeper than any she had imagined pulsed through her. Tomorrow she was to stand before the world as a bride, yet now the future she had prepared for felt shattered. She sank into a chair, her breath uneven. All her life she had upheld duty and restraint, but now those virtues felt like chains binding her to betrayal. For the first time, she questioned whether silence was truly noble. The thought frightened her, yet also sparked a small defiance she scarcely recognized. A gentle knock startled her. Before she could compose herself, the door opened enough to reveal Mr. James Linwood, a friend of her brother and a man whose steady presence she had always found comforting. He stepped inside with careful respect, concern darkening his expression. Eleanor straightened instinctively. "Lady Eleanor," he said softly, "I noticed your absence and feared you might need a moment's company." His voice held sincere warmth. She feared he might see the cracks beneath her composure, yet his presence eased her breathing. "I am well," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "Only fatigued. The preparations are much to manage." James's gaze lingered on her face. "If the burden grows too heavy," he murmured, You need not carry it alone. Something in his tone, steady, earnest, touched her deeply. A whisper of hope brushed her heart, fragile but undeniable. For the first time since witnessing the betrayal, she felt a faint warmth return. She rose and moved to the window, staring out at the gardens where dusk settled in soft shades of gray and blue. The trees swayed with a slow elegance, indifferent to her turmoil, and their calm only deepened the ache within her. She wondered how long the affair had existed, whether it had been born of a single moment's weakness or nurtured during quiet exchanges she had been too trusting to notice. She replayed every past interaction with the Duke, searching for signs she might have missed. The brief pauses, the evasive glances, the thoughtful silences she had once mistaken for reserve. Now they appeared in a harsher light, each revealing a truth she wished she had never needed to see. Her heart tightened at the realization that she had built her future upon the thinnest of foundations, trusting in honor where none had been offered. Tonight, the morning after the discovery unfolded with a quiet severity that clung to every corridor of the Harcourt estate. Eleanor moved through it with deliberate composure, though inside her thoughts churned with a grief too deep for tears. Servants avoided meeting her eyes, sensing disturbance without understanding its depth. At breakfast, the tension among her family settled like frost upon the silverware. Her mother attempted gentle conversation, but her father's silence spoke more clearly. The future of their household rested upon decisions his daughter alone now held the power to make. When he finally addressed her, it was only to ask whether she had slept, and her quiet nod seemed to reassure him, though it masked the enormity of her unrest. Later she sought refuge in the conservatory, where the faint scent of winter roses softened the weight upon her chest. There, in the tempered quiet, she allowed herself to remember the Duke's whispered promises, words that now felt borrowed, never his to give. The ache was sharp, but even sharper was the dawning certainty that she had mistaken formality for devotion. As she traced a fingertip along a petal glazed in morning frost, she heard footsteps and turned to find Mr. Nathaniel Linden, the estate steward, regarding her with a restrained concern that made her breath catch. Nathaniel asked if she wished for company or solitude. Eleanor hesitated, then allowed him a few moments beside her, for his presence did not require her to pretend. She confided only the outline of her distress, careful not to reveal more than propriety allowed. Nathaniel listened with a quiet attentiveness that steadied her pulse, though he offered no judgment, only the reminder that silence, when chosen out of fear, could bind a person more tightly than any vow. His counsel lingered with her long after he left, stirring thoughts she scarcely dared to examine. When the Duke arrived near midday, the estate fell into an uneasy hush. Eleanor met him in the east drawing-room, a small space where neither grandeur nor distraction could soften the gravity of their conversation. He moved toward her with practiced charm, offering apologies wrapped in elegant phrasing, yet none touched the wound he had inflicted. She asked him plainly whether the affection she had witnessed between him and her cousin had blossomed before or after their engagement. His answer, hesitant, evasive, told her more than any polished justification could have. She stood motionless as he spoke of duty, alliances, and the necessity of maintaining appearances. Yet each argument only strengthened her resolve. With quiet firmness, she told him she could not bind herself to a man whose regard for her had proved so fragile. The Duke's face tightened, his pride affronted, but he offered no further defense. He left with a curt bow, and Eleanor waited until the door closed before she allowed her trembling hands to fall to her sides. The relief that washed over her was laced with fear, but it was her own, unborrowed, undisguised, and wholly earned. The afternoon passed beneath a heavy sky as preparations continued for the evening's pre-wedding supper, which tradition demanded proceed despite the unraveling of its purpose. Eleanor dressed with the same meticulous grace she had practiced since girlhood, though her reflection felt unfamiliar, as if she were looking at a version of herself newly awakened. Upon descending the staircase, she greeted guests with unwavering poise, each smile a delicate veil hiding the truth she had yet to reveal to anyone beyond her family. As the supper progressed, whispers drifted through the candlelit hall, subtle enough to overlook yet sharp enough to reach her ears. Her cousin avoided her gaze, pale and restless, though Eleanor spared her neither cruelty nor comfort. The music swelled, the guests laughed, and the illusion of celebration persisted, yet beneath the polished surface Eleanor felt herself standing on the verge of an unknown path, one she had chosen not through expectation but through conviction. Needing air, she stepped onto the terrace, where winter winds cooled the warmth gathering behind her eyes. She rested her hands upon the stone balustrade, breathing deeply as she tried to steady her thoughts. When Nathaniel approached, she turned without surprise. His presence carried the quiet assurance of a man who offered steadiness without seeking reward. He asked if she desired honest counsel, and she nodded. In the muted glow from the windows, she spoke more freely than she had hours earlier. Nathaniel's responses were thoughtful, measured, revealing a depth of understanding she had never credited him with before. Their conversation deepened until the music inside seemed little more than a distant echo. For a moment the world felt narrowed to the fragile warmth between them, something unspoken yet undeniable. But before either could speak further, a crash erupted from the direction of the hall. A glass shattered, followed by rising voices and hurried footsteps. Eleanor straightened, her breath catching in her throat as shadows flickered across the terrace floor. For several long seconds she remained frozen, sensing that the harmony of the evening had been fractured in a manner far more dramatic than an accident. The murmurs carried a tone she recognized too well, the pitch of gossip eager to seize upon misfortune. Eleanor felt her heartbeat quicken, not from fear but from a certainty that the consequences of her choice were beginning to spill into the open. She gathered a breath, preparing herself to face whatever awaited beyond tea. The morning after the scandalous discovery dawned with a pallid hush upon Harcourt Manor, as though the very air had absorbed Eleanor's humiliation and did not dare disturb it. She moved through the corridors with a composure so carefully maintained that even the footmen, who had witnessed her distress the previous night, could not decipher whether she had slept or wept. Every step she took carried the weight of the broken promise she had uncovered, yet she held her head aloft, determined that no one, not even her mother, should perceive the fractures beneath her calm exterior. The Duke's betrayal had not merely wounded her heart, it had jeopardized the fragile prospects of her family. The world she had spent months arranging had collapsed in a single whispered gasp from behind a pillar when she saw him kissing her radiant, reckless cousin Lydia. Now she sought clarity, as though reason might fortify her against the chaos that threatened her dignity. When the Duke arrived at mid-morning, Eleanor greeted him in the conservatory, where sunlight filtered through glass panes and cast soft illumination upon the wintering roses. He attempted civility, speaking her name with a gentleness she had once believed sincere, yet she saw in his eyes the tremor of guilt that accompanied every half-formed sentence. She allowed him no deceit, nor the comfort of easy absolution. With painstaking grace, she asked the questions that had tormented her through the long hours of darkness. His responses, halting, earnest, and laden with conflict, revealed that he felt affection for Lydia but maintained an obligation toward Eleanor born of duty and his promise to her father. She listened without interruption, though each confession stung like an icy lash. It became increasingly clear that he desired a life unconfined by the rigid expectations of the aristocracy, yet lacked the courage to claim it. For the first time, Eleanor saw not a nobleman of impeccable stature but a man adrift in weaknesses she could no longer excuse. Their conversation concluded not with resolution but with a solemn acknowledgment that nothing between them could remain untouched. Eleanor assured him she would give the matter careful consideration, though privately she already sensed the truth settling within her like a dawning sunrise, one that illuminated a path she had never before dared to imagine. As he departed with a bow tinged by shame, she understood that whatever course she chose would alter the trajectory of every life entwined with hers. Her mother's anxious inquiries, her father's silent burdens, and Lydia's reckless hopes would all converge upon her next decision. Seeking respite from the oppressive silence of the manor, Eleanor ventured into the frosted gardens, where the stillness allowed her thoughts to unfurl. There, she unexpectedly encountered Mr. Jonathan Westbrook, the scholarly and reserved gentleman who had long been a friend of her late brother. His presence steadied her like a familiar melody. He observed at once that her usual serenity had faltered, though he offered no intrusive questions. Instead, he walked beside her, matching her pace with thoughtful restraint. When she finally confided the truth of the Duke's infidelity, his expression darkened with protective indignation. Yet he tempered his reaction, sensing that what she needed was not outrage but understanding. Jonathan spoke of her worth with an eloquence that pierced through the fog of self-doubt. He reminded her that no title, however grand, could compensate for a loveless union. His words were tender but measured, spoken with the care of a man who cherished her yet dared not hope for anything beyond friendship. Eleanor found herself drawn to the sincerity in his gaze, so different from the Duke's polished charm, and for a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to imagine a life shaped by mutual respect rather than obligation. But she brushed aside the thought, believing it a luxury she could not afford while her family's future hung in the balance. Later that afternoon, Lydia sought Eleanor in her dressing room, her eyes bright with nervous anticipation. She attempted an apology, though it stumbled between defensiveness and remorse. Lydia confessed that she had never intended harm, only that her heart had been swept up by the Duke's attentions, which had awakened hopes she could not suppress. Eleanor listened in silence, recognizing in her cousin's tears both youthful folly and genuine affection. She felt the sharp sting of betrayal soften into a quiet ache. Though wounded, she could not bring herself to condemn Lydia entirely. The situation had become a tangle of emotions too complex for simple judgments. As evening approached, Eleanor withdrew to her father's study, where the crackling hearth provided a warmth she desperately needed. She weighed her options with the precision of a woman accustomed to navigating society's treacherous expectations. A broken engagement would subject her to scrutiny and gossip. A continued engagement would bind her to a man whose affections lay elsewhere. Neither path promised peace, yet one offered a semblance of integrity. She closed her eyes and envisioned the life she had nearly entered, the grand halls, the glittering soirees, the cold, dutiful marriage. Then she contrasted it with the quiet strength she had felt beside Jonathan, who had never once made her feel inadequate or invisible. Her decision crystallized with a sense of calm she had not expected. She would not marry a man who had given his heart to another. She would face the consequences with dignity and allow the truth to guide her, regardless of society's judgment.